The purpose of why you exist is simple. It could be as much as to make as much money as we possibly can. My original company was to help people rewrite their mission, vision, and value statements because it was out of touch with reality. And it's very simple. The mission is the purpose. You should be able to state why your purpose, your organization exists in 9 words or less.
What is a CEO, a leader's job? It's to increase productivity. That's it.
At the end of the day, Tim, if you're the owner of the company and you don't know what everybody is doing every day, how likely are you going to be successful?
One of the things that I'm seeing dominate the solo LLCs, et cetera, is the gig economy.
Because the employees said, you changed the culture to invest in us first so we could invest in our patients. And once we felt good about this environment that we worked in, we only knew our job was to care for people.
And if you could go back and give your younger self advice, what would it be? And it does not have to be financial advice. Welcome to today's PlanAssist Podcast, where we help listeners make better financial decisions. I'm Tim Clifford, and what we try to do with these podcasts is interview successful business owners and business leaders to help you as a listener make better financial decisions. And PlanAssist is not an investment. It's not a product. It's actually a process that's built around helping you answer yes to 3 questions. The first question is your income aligned with your lifestyle? Okay, so question 2 is your income diversified and resilient? And then number 3 is, are you making progress on both? Now, whether you're listening as an individual, kind of thinking about yourself, or whether you're doing this as a business leader, all 3 of those questions apply. And so what we're going to do today, and I'm super excited to be joined by Carm Moceri. He's principal of Re-Envision Alignment Solutions. Carm is a certified executive coach. He's a board advisor and a former healthcare executive with deep experience in leadership, strategy, culture, and organizational transformation. He's served on senior leadership roles including hospital president, chief strategy officer, and helped executives and boards, leaderships improve alignment and communication, decision-making, and kind of aligning culture. And that's probably what I would say is our biggest challenge. So in today's world, there's just so much noise, and it's so easy to get unaligned in any one of those kind of areas, and then it makes running the business that much more difficult and that much more challenging. So with that, I am super excited to be joined by Carm. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Tim, you know what? You did a great job, actually. You reminded me of some things that I spent some time working on over the last, 35 years. So thank you for the nice introduction, and I'm really excited to be here with you.
That's awesome. Thanks a bunch, Carm. I appreciate you being here. So now what I do is, before we get into kind of what you see as opportunities and challenges in some of these small to mid-sized businesses, I always start these podcasts off with the same question. If you could go back and give your younger self advice, what would it be? And it does not have to be financial advice. It can be any kind of advice you'd give yourself.
Yeah, and I think all of us, over time learn just wonderful lessons and are taught by great mentors, and just experience have really provided insight that we didn't have when we were younger. So for me, it would not be financial advice. It really would be advice around leadership.
Okay.
And what I found early on in my career was I was put in these positions of responsibility. I was 29 when I became a hospital president, and I thought they put me in that role because I was supposed to know everything and tell people what to do. And the advice I would give now is that the role of a leader is not about command and control, but it really is about how do we create a culture that's healthy, in which through engaging others, we motivate and inspire them to do their best work. And I'm finding with one of my clients today, a very successful regional executive, that about 75% of the time he starts his meeting by telling people what to do, and his team is disengaged. And we spent an hour yesterday changing his mindset around, if you were at the table being told what to do as a senior executive, what would your response be? So my response would be is, I have a lot of input, just ask me for it. And so that change in mindset around engaging people through appreciative inquiry and then letting the team help you succeed is a much more effective way to lead than trying to command and control.
Yeah, it's such great advice and a great way to start this off. One thing that I was really fortunate to bump into years and years ago was whenever we're asked to give a presentation. I'll be curious what you think of this, but whenever we're asked to give any kind of a presentation, whether it's to our employees, whether it's to a group of people, whatever, there's a couple kind of core rules that people need to put in ink, and don't break these rules because it's so important, is at least for me, right? So this, again, this is just an advice, so people kind of do what they want. But the one that I heard, and I'll be curious what you think of this, is number one is the reason Toastmasters uses 7 minutes, because they have tested it over decades and decades, that if you can't say what you need to say in 7 minutes, you're going to lose everybody. Okay, so that's number one. So 7 minutes, maybe 10. Okay. But you go past 10, you're going to lose everybody. Okay. People do, they just can't kind of get that in their head because of their egos. The second thing is the structure is super, super simple. And it's start with I, move to you as fast as you possibly can, touch on the point that you're trying to make, introduce an enemy. So who is the enemy? And then give a quote, right? So anytime you're running a meeting, anytime you're talking to people, you kind of, so I literally have that kind of layout. Even though I've watched it for years and years and years, I literally have it printed out on my desk and off to the side so it reminds me to kind of move off I as fast as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some great advice, right? And Toastmasters has been successful for years because of it. When I think about how do you deliver a message, there's a basic process that I always think about, right? The first is, what's your 30-second elevator speech?
Yep.
How do you communicate what you need, what you want, and align that with what is most important to your organization?
And that's difficult. I mean, they need someone like you to help. I mean, I've worked on my 30-minute elevator speech for decades and decades. That's not as easy as it sounds, is it?
It is not. And what's fascinating about most of this, and the reason why in 2007 I created my organization, which this is a division of it, which was called Healthcare Alignment Solutions, which was a consulting firm, was because I found there was a tremendous misalignment between the mission, vision, and values of organizations and how they actually operated and showed up every day. And when we started the work, what we found was, if your lowest level producer of your company is not fully aligned with the purpose of why you exist, they should not be working there. It's that simple.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Everybody's aligned on where you're going and the purpose of why they're there as a contributor to the overall vision of where you want to go, then they're all working at their own desires. And until you bring that back into full alignment, then you will have an organization that is, number one, misaligned, and number two, cannot produce its highest level of productivity, and ultimately will not achieve that mission and vision. So that, to me, we get so caught up in the us versus them, the me versus you, we forget about it is the us that will bring us to the ultimate goal that we're seeking, which is to fulfill that mission. And once you start to permeate that through your organization, I don't care if you have 2 employees or you have 5,000 employees, until that is fully aligned, you are not going to be as effective as an organization as you desire to be.
That's a really good feedback. And I think that's exactly right. And for me personally, I was so fortunate to go to work for Charles Schwab and Company in 1990. Okay, now when I went to work there, we had 40 branches. Okay, Chuck still ran the company. Now he almost gets no credit for his leadership skills because it happened so long ago. So they want to pull people like Musk and, all the kind of newer people in Apple, et cetera. But I went on from there and worked at Ameriprise. I worked at H&R Block. I've been in kind of my thing. And I can tell you, no company I worked at was better with mission, vision, and alignment than Chuck. And I think what it was and I constantly tried to message this was he was like an early adopter is measure what matters. Right. I mean, now there's whole books written on it. But if you worked at Schwab, it was very, very clear what we were doing. Right. And there was a period where we focused on new accounts. There was a period where we focused on new accounts and assets. And then kind of by the time I left, we were really just focused on assets. Right. So how do we make clients, move more money and move more assets? And it just was so refreshing and fun to be part of an organization where everyone was aligned. And what I want to get to you is I think people overthink the mission and vision, and I think they put a bunch of soft stuff in there when really it comes down to measure what matters.
Yeah, and as I think about this, and let's just go back to Nassau decades ago.
Okay.
Alignment. It was the most beautiful story about an alignment that helps an organization understand what's most important. And I've done the research because I heard the fable and I wanted to know if it was real. But when you look it up, this did happen. A reporter went into NASA before they were getting ready to launch and go to the moon. And he was in the lobby and he saw an environmental service worker and just said, "Tell me what you do here." And simply put, the individual said, "I'm here to put a man on the moon." He didn't say, "I'm here to clean the floors." He didn't say, "I'm here to work in environmental services." He saw his role as putting a man on the moon. And then I thought about the organizations that I worked in. And when you ask people what they're doing, they tell you their tasks.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so
Right?
powerful.
So now when we look at mission, to your point, mission statements used to be 3-4 pages long or paragraphs after paragraph. When I helped, my original company was to help people rewrite their mission, vision, and value statements because it was out of touch with reality. And it's very simple. The mission is the purpose. You should be able to state why your purpose, your organization exists in 9 words or less. And if you do that, everybody in your company can connect with that. When it's 3 and 4 pages long or several paragraphs long, people don't know how to assimilate that into their heads. But if you say simply, let's go to healthcare. If you say simply that our mission is to improve the health of the people and communities we serve, every single employee can connect to that.
Yep.
If you say my organization is to help people become the most effective leaders they can, you understand what that means. And everybody that works with me understands what that means. Our entire role for showing up every day is to help people become exceptional leaders. That's simple. So we don't have to debate that any longer. We don't have to say, I'm right, you're wrong. We have to say, what do we do collectively to get there? And so we have to simplify our messages. The purpose of why you exist is simple. It could be as much as to make as much money as we possibly can. That's okay. If that's your mission as a company, then everybody who works there, number one thing they have to do is figure out how to make the company more money. If your mission is about service, then how do we provide higher quality, exceptional service? It doesn't matter. You choose what your purpose is. It's pretty clear, right? If you're a grocery store, your purpose isn't to wash cars.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So people can start to align. And once you get a team of people aligned around a single direction and a single reason to come to work every day, you change the entire culture. And as a matter of fact, I took an organization of 5,000 employees and we became known as designated by St. Louis Magazine as the only institution, hospital in that community to date to be known as a great place to work. Because the employees said, you changed the culture to invest in us first so we could invest in our patients. And once we felt good about this environment that we worked in, we only knew our job was to care for people. We stopped arguing about all this little stuff. Now, certainly, conflict is part of what all organizations go through, but as long as you resolve it constructively, every individual, every company will go with some level of conflict. But as long as you resolve it constructively, it's healthy. So you want differing opinions in your organization because it will force you to be better by thinking about all options instead of a single option. So to your point, simplify your message, coalesce around your mission, get your team engaged. For those that really don't believe in the mission, give them an opportunity to work for your competition, and then get people aligned to head towards fulfilling those things that are most important to your organization.
And I think people, and I was guilty of this, so I'm not pointing fingers, actually. This was my challenge when I started my own RIA 10 years ago. I just overthought it.
Yeah. It's simple. Like I said, what was your purpose for your organization?
Exactly.
That's it. You can overthink it, right? And you can put
Yeah.
a lot of great flowery
And
words
and then you
together.
think I got to change this because and then you're a month in and now you're changing it to this and you're changing it to this and next thing you know you've wasted 2 years kind of bouncing around
Yeah.
without any real clear mission.
Yeah, what's interesting is back decades ago when my daughters, we have three daughters, when our daughters were playing club volleyball, right? So this isn't a multi-billion dollar, they're club teams. They're teams of, 30 to 100 young athletes that are just trying to play volleyball. And we were part of USA Volleyball, which is a national venue that has over 300,000 athletes in it. But we were a small club, and or my daughters were playing for a club, and two of the coaches came to me after the season had ended and said, we want to start our own club. We don't believe in the way this club is running. We don't believe in what they're focusing on, but we know you're an executive and you've got experience, and we've heard great things about the places that you're leading, so we want you to help us put a business plan together. I said, okay, so you want a business plan? Yeah. So I started working on the business plan, and then I went back to my roots and said, wait a minute, why does this club exist? So I went to the two people that were going to be the owners. There were two females. One was a two-time All-American setter. The other's in the Hall of Fame for Colorado. So they're both great athletes, right?
Yep.
And I went to the two of them and I said, what is the purpose of why you want to develop this club? They said, nobody really talks about that in volleyball. I said, well, I am. If you want a business plan, I got to know what it is you are and where you intend to go and what are the values by which you're going to treat each other and treat everybody you engage with. And they said, we haven't thought about that. I said, okay. I said, how about if I develop a survey, send the survey out to club leaders across the nation, to coaches, to parents, and to athletes, and ask them what they think the purpose of a volleyball club is. And what's fascinating is very few said it was to develop my athlete to go play in college. They talked about morals, they talked about ethics, they talked about team members, they talked about team skills, they talked about high character, they talked about leadership. So all of a sudden, we get these 25 surveys back from across the country that don't talk about the volleyball club is here to prepare my kid for college volleyball. They talked about my volleyball club is here to prepare my young child for life.
Yeah, how awesome.
And when we wrote our mission statement, it talked a little bit about to help them become better skilled athletes in volleyball, but it also talked about developing them into high characters and leaders.
Did that align with those two individuals right out of the gate once they
Oh my
saw it,
gosh,
or were they like, no, no, I really want just to win at volleyball?
that's exactly. They said, we want to teach these young ladies how to be great leaders and how to be great team members.
So they
And
complete,
that teammates, you heard me, team members. What
right.
they were saying is these girls, because only 1% of high school athletes go on to play professional volleyball, only 3% go on to play college volleyball. Of the 300 and some thousand athletes, and only those that are graduating actually go on further in their college careers. So they said, this aligns with what we believe in because neither one of us who are nationally known play volleyball for a living. One's a nurse and the other is an IT executive. So I said, so we want to prepare them to be leaders. So these women, because the majority of kids, we didn't start any of our boys' teams until the 6th and 7th year we were in existence. So they were all females, young ladies between the ages of 8 and 18. And we believed our mission was to prepare them to be leaders because they're going to be on teams like families, they're going to be on school teams, they're going to be on work teams, and very few of them are going to be on athletic teams after they graduate high school. So we saw a very different purpose for our existence. And when we did that, people flocked to our club. We were
Wow.
successful within the first year because people said, you are focused on something completely different than what we hear from the other clubs, which is about our role is to get them into a Division I volleyball club in college. which, you know what, if that's what your purpose is, that's great. That wasn't our purpose.
So let's go down an example of someone's listening to this podcast. They're running a $1 million to $5 million business. They have 10 or 12 employees, and we'll just say they're doing siding on roofing. Let's use roofing as an example, just to make something up, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So then let's give them an example of how they might do a mission statement. They're doing okay. They're making money. The people owning the company are making, whatever, 100 grand a year or something like that. But then because roofing has a really bad reputation, so it's a good example, right? Because it's that a bunch of scumbags run around and tell me my roof's bad, and you know what I mean? I mean, so from a consumer perspective, let's do, just for fun, a mission statement for a small roofing company.
Yeah. So the first way that I would work with somebody on that is I would ask them and whomever else is involved, and that's important.
Okay.
It can't just be the owner, because if it's just the owner, you have one perspective. Now, that goes back to command and control. I'm the owner, so I get to make all the decisions. But the reality is, without input from others, you are making a very narrow decision. So I would suggest you engage someone else.
Or a few people, a whiteboard.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Actually,
bring four or five people into a meeting with a whiteboard. Beautiful. And just start talking.
That's exactly right. So the first time we get together is not to write the mission statement.
Okay.
First time we get together is to say, what are the key words that describe the purpose of why you exist as a company?
And what they're going to find is one of two things. And I'm curious if you do this, is they're going to find out they don't even have a mission statement, or they have one that they just haven't refined.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Or they have one that's old and doesn't reflect the way they truly operate the company.
Okay.
But whatever it is, wherever they are, I just ask them for keywords, and I start writing those keywords down. And then I ask them to debate them. Which of those words are most important? Because now you've got 15, 16 different words. It doesn't make a statement. It's just concepts, theories, thoughts. And people start to chime up, and they start to say, yeah, that one's most important. Okay, show of hands, is that most important? Yeah, 2/3 of you say it is. Okay, that one is most important. Now, what about the next? And we go through that process, and it constructs a series of words that describe the purpose of the company. I then ask them about their vision. Well, what's a vision? Well, a vision is the roadmap that gets you to where you want to go. So let's say you want to be the number one provider of roofing services in the community, right? What's the vision to do that? Well, by 2028, we want to be the most exceptional roofing company in Southeast Florida. Now we have a vision. Now we have a roadmap. By when are we doing what, and what is it we're going to do? That supports that mission. But again, we take words.
But no numbers yet, which I find interesting. Okay, so we're just talking words at this point.
Yeah, just words. And then finally is the values. So I ask them, what are the most important values? And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of values.
Yes.
What are the most important 3 up to 5, no more than 5? And some people might say teamwork. Some people might say ethics. Some people might say integrity. Some people might say financial strength. Whatever it is, whatever their values are, we jot those down, and then we kind of take a survey again and say which are the top 3 to 5.
That's awesome. So, but before you go farther, because I'm going to keep interrupting. I'm not meaning to interrupt you, but I want to make it a conversation and not just kind of a. So okay, now as a financial advisor, I'm going to kind of stick in here and kind of talk about what I think the risk of those 3 little steps in conversations are. So I'm running a small business, right? And if I'm the CEO, okay, the number one job I have is make money. I'm not saying you put that in your mission statement, but it's very, very important that everyone grasps the number one thing. And I get into these debates on X with people that get woke, and they get about, my statements are, it's family, we're going to help people, we're going to, make this, welcoming, diverse community, et cetera. I'm not saying any of that's not important. Okay. So understand something, but what a typical person will miss, even CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, is they can't change the fact that their order of importance is shareholders, clients, employees, right? And when I tell people that, Carm, they're shocked by that. I mean, they're like, what? I would never work for a company that does that. And I say, That's the only way a company works. That's actually why you have a board of directors. People don't realize that the board of directors is to make sure that the company is focusing on shareholders first, clients second, employees third, right? That doesn't mean you can't kind of come out with some different stuff. But like even when I was at Schwab, I kind of kicked off. There was never a misunderstanding with any employee. It was one of my funnest places to work. I probably learned the most leadership from Chuck Schwab of any person I've ever worked with. But he was very, very clear. The number one kind of
Mhm.
entity is shareholders. Okay, so now take that and
Yeah.
talk through that and tell me how much I could be, or you think I'm wrong or whatever. But I wanted to kind of throw that into those first three steps.
Again, if you own a company and you have a board of directors, it is between you and the board as to what it is your focus is, right? Right. Now, typically, you could have the mission of this company is just to make money for the shareholders. As a matter of fact, some of the biggest companies in the world had that in the past. But then when people go to the website and say, show me your mission, and they read that, they say, well, that's not the company that I want to buy goods and products from or services because they're only trying to make money on me. They don't care about me. They don't care about.
Yeah, good
So
point.
part of it is you have to think, right? Because the reason why we were successful as a volleyball club is the only way people knew what our mission was is when it was posted on our website so that people could go to it and understand what we stood for.
Right.
Okay. So what I'd suggest is the following. If you understand your purpose, and again, if you're a roofing company, and let's say it is
Yeah.
to put roofs and service people and keep them safe from the elements, then develop that statement. Now, when you get down then to your objectives as a company, you would have whatever number, right? One of
Oh,
them
I
might be
see. So
around
objective
service.
becomes four.
Right. So maybe it's around
That makes
service.
sense.
Maybe it's around financial performance and sustainability. Maybe it's around
Okay.
employee engagement. Maybe it's around quality. Whatever it is, those are now your objectives.
That makes
And
sense.
your objectives on financial performance is we expect to make X percentage of margin on every job. We expect to make X percentage of profit per year, whatever it is. Now they understand in order to fulfill that mission of being the greatest roofing company in the community, we have to perform financially exceptionally. So your
Exactly. And by
objectives,
doing that, you first have this conversation where everyone can kind of talk about everything. And then by the time you get to objective, you have to make money. Now you have to align those words with that fourth section of objective, right? So you still do have
yeah,
to make money.
just the opposite, right? You have to align the objectives to the mission, not the mission to the objective.
Exactly. Okay, cool. Yeah, I
And
got it.
everything you do in every plan you have should relate to those objectives because those objectives are going to help you fulfill that mission. Now you have alignment.
Yeah, no, that's right. I'd never really gone through that process, that alignment that you just did, but that's exactly right. And that's why when you talk about the first meeting, it's just words. You're not really trying to write the mission statement. What you're trying to do is just get people thinking about, well, what would it be? But maybe it's the third or fourth meeting that you start coming up with, okay, what is that 9-word mission statement? But it has to align with all four of those steps.
Yeah, and so yeah, the next process then would be as I take all that information, I then write up a draft mission, a draft vision, and then the values. And then
Okay.
I send it all out and then we get back together. And now we react to it and now we start to tweak. I
And
don't
how
know.
far down in an organization, use the roofing company as an example.
Yeah.
How far down would you typically go? Would it just be, now they don't have C suites in a company that size, but I mean, would you just do like, 4 or 5 key employees, 2 or 3 employees? I mean, what
Yeah.
would you do?
If you had a board, I would have a board member there, at least one. I would have whatever leadership you have. So you probably have yourself as a CEO. You probably have like a manager or director that manages the teams out there. And if you had, let's say, a couple division, one division is the one that goes and buys the products and gets them on site. You have another leader that's on the site managing the actual roof removal and the roof installation, right? So you want the different functions at the table because they think about different things. So that's why you want them there because they're going to bring you rich input. See, the problem with many, or the challenge that many leaders have, and I was different because I came up when I started in healthcare, I started as a nurse assistant while I was going to nursing school. Then I became a nurse. Then, as an executive for 30 years, I worked every job in every hospital I ever worked at as an employee. So I talked to the staff every day. I got their perspectives. I understood what was important to them, and then I communicated what was important to us. That they are not there to do a task, they're there to help us fulfill this thing called our mission. Right? So the input is so rich from those people who understand the different components of your company. You want them there as you're developing that mission statement. So yeah, you want 4 or 5 people in the room. You want the first input. You want to challenge your thoughts. And then ultimately, once you solidify that, you now have 4 or 5 owners of your mission. And ownership is critical. I don't like accountability. I don't think accountability is a word that really should be used in corporations, because what it means is I'm a task-oriented person. I'm accountable for cleaning the floors. I'm accountable for taking the roof tiles off. I'm accountable for nailing the roof tiles on. That's what they think, not I am an owner of our vision to be the most exceptional roof company in our community. Once you become an owner of your mission, you change the entire culture, because you don't have to be told every day what you need to do, how you need to do it. You actually go out and seek additional work once you complete your main tasks, because as an owner, you say, I know I can do 3 more things to help this company be successful. You
Yeah, that's
change the
that's so
culture.
good. And one of the strategies that I do use, and you brought it up, is when clients are trying to make big financial decisions, the way I always frame that is, who do we need in the room? It's
Yeah.
interesting I mean, and that room could be virtual. That room could be, not everyone's at the same time in the room, but if you're making a big financial decision, before you start really debating hard on the details of it, make sure that you're clear and you've written down who needs to be in the room. And you kind of brought, so whether it's a CPA, the attorney, et cetera, right? And you brought that up. If you're running a business, if you get used to who needs to be in the room for this decision, you start getting ownership, right? I mean, that's a critical piece of, whether you're running a 10-person roofing business or whether you're running a multi-state distribution center, right? I mean, it's the same process.
It's no different. And what's fascinating is, and I experienced throughout my entire career, right? What's fascinating is when you ask somebody to switch roles with you. So, for example, let's say you were having a problem with employees showing up late for work every day. So there's a couple of ways to approach it, right? Number one, you could go and say to the employee, listen, if you don't start showing up for work on time every day, I'm going to have to fire you. I'm going to have to release you to the competition, however you want to term it, right? You can reverse the thoughts and go to the person and say, okay, you're now the CEO of this company, and I'm coming into work every day late. Your teams can't get out to the roofing jobs on time. You're short-staffed because the teams leave without you, which means you don't have enough people to do the job, which means you're delaying completing the job, which means your customers are upset with you, which means financially it's costing us too much money because it's taking us too long to get each job done. So you're in charge. How do you approach that? What
That's
do you do to
good.
make a change?
That's a really good
Right?
strategy.
Because what it does is it helps people see themselves in a way that all they see is, I have problems getting to work on time, and everybody needs to understand that. When you say your livelihood now is in jeopardy because of my behavior, and you ask them how would they deal with it, you'd be fascinated to see how people respond.
Yeah, that's good.
That's all.
Okay, so to summarize this section, then I want to go, then we'll go on to the next section of kind of what I want to talk about, kind of opportunities and challenges. Is to make a mission statement, it is do it over the course of 3 or 4 meetings, right? I mean, that's number one. Number two is start with just some words,
Mhm.
and so mission, what vision,
Yeah. Mission, vision, and values. Mission is the purpose of why you exist.
uh,
Vision is the roadmap to achieve your mission. And values are the behaviors in which you will use to treat each other and to treat everyone you serve.
and then I, as a financial advisor, will add objectives. So make sure
That,
the
that comes
making
after.
money, don't miss that step, because you cannot succeed without making money. I know that sounds evil and not good and all that kind of stuff to a certain group of people, but it has to be really high on your list, or you. Oh, it's sad how many people I see kind of just have these decent opportunities that forget about the objective,
Yeah, and
i.e., making money.
That's the next phase, right? After you have mission, vision, values, then you say, what are the key objectives we have to focus on in order to help us fulfill that mission, vision, and values? And then that objectives come from there. And then once you have those objectives, now you have to have a plan. So if you want to make X amount of profitability on each job, what is your plan to do that? We have to
Yeah,
manage our
exactly.
labor costs. We
So,
want to manage our supply costs,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So then all that stuff kind of comes together and
Yep.
you start down that path. Okay. So now the next thing, let's talk a little bit about as you've worked with businesses over the last, let's just kind of keep it pretty recent, last 24 months. What do you see as kind of their biggest both challenge and then their biggest opportunity?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest challenges that leaders are facing today is just the complete and utter barrage of barriers that stand in the way of them being successful. So maintaining labor. So
Yeah, oh
turnover,
yeah, it's a good
right?
one.
Turnover, right? The tremendous increase in cost of supplies. So now all of a sudden we're losing our people. It's costing us too much money to buy our stuff. And then finally, the amount of competition that's out there. And as they're trying to navigate through this world, they're constantly being, you know, barraged with all of these significant challenges. And what I find is that when you start to change culture, guess what happens to turnover,
Goes to zero or close.
right? So all of a sudden now you're not having to go out and try to recruit more people, right? You've got a stable group. Now think about a team. So you got a team of roofers. If you're constantly changing out that team of roofers with different people, how effective are they at working together?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You typically don't add a new quarterback to a professional football team and they go out and win the Super Bowl in their first year. You can, but it's rare because they don't know each other well. They don't work together well. They don't know their behaviors well. So with this constant turnover, it is costing them so much money. For small companies, it's about 35% of somebody's salary every time you lose someone to recruit someone and get them back up to speed.
And so before we change subjects on that, I just want to have a conversation around one of the things that I'm seeing dominate the solo LLCs, et cetera, is the gig economy, right? So you have Upworks, you have Fiverr. I mean, you have this, and I noticed that some of the older companies, right? They have a really hard time rethinking how they do stuff, right? But we're talking about employees specifically. And I'm not saying that you can always go out and hire that particular role on Upworks. I'm not saying that at all. So I'm not saying that's but if you're running a sign shop, use as an example with 12 employees, right? Periodically, you do have to take a step back and say, could we run this with 7 and have part-time or really good people that are helping us with our logos or helping us with, marketing as an example that aren't technically employees of us, right? But it makes it easier to pull in and out. Are you seeing that as, I see that as both a challenge and an opportunity when we're talking about employees.
Yeah, and again, depend upon the size of the company, you can't have all the leaders and resources that you need at your disposal to be part of your company. You can't afford that, right?
Correct.
It's just a reality.
Especially if you're 10 to 20 people,
Yeah,
you cannot get the expertise that you need
no,
for
you
that
can't.
company.
So, yeah, so I absolutely agree with you. But to me, it needs to be very targeted and very
Yeah,
specific.
that's a good
Got
point.
to set the range for this is what I need. This is how long I need it for. This is the outcome I'm expecting, right? People go too long. They have people working in the organization that are not giving them what they need. So you have to really define your needs and you have to be targeted and you have to be specific and then you have to manage it. Because now they think, well, I hired this person, someone else is managing them. No, you do. You have to get them aligned with what you need. You have to be responsive. You have to meet with them. You have to look at their outcome. You have to make sure they're focused on your needs. You have to make sure they're focused on the timing, right? Part of them is you think, well, it's a third party, so somebody else is going to do all that work. It's your company.
I took over a recruiting group in one of my roles, and one of the first things that I did is I said, I need you guys, and it was small. It was only, I don't know, 10 of us. It wasn't a big group. But I said, and this became more selfish than anything, but it was, I used it so many times over the next 20 years. It was shocking. I selfishly, I just wanted to know what everyone did, right?
Mhm.
So I told them all to write, give me what you do. Oh my gosh, Carm, it was shocking how hard it was for them and how much amp and disconnect there was in that process. I thought it would be a 2 day exercise turned into like a 2 month process because getting everyone aligned with who was doing what, you think that everyone knows kind of what they're doing and then what they're responsible for. They don't.
Well, Tim, it's fascinating you mentioned that because when we owned this volleyball club, we had some individuals from USA Volleyball
Uh,
as employees. They were part-time employees for us. They helped us with certain things, and I got introduced to a sports psychologist. The sports psychologist was the sports psychologist for mostly female athletes around the world. It was a woman. She was an athlete herself, and when we started talking, and I had my company called Healthcare Alignment Solutions, she said one of the biggest failure points in companies across the world is a misunderstanding of individuals' roles in the company.
wow.
And from that point on, now for over 25 years, I have honed a document called Role Clarity, where we identify the different levels in the organization, what the key roles and responsibilities are at each of those levels, where they spend their time, how much time are they spending on operations, how much time are they spending on strategies, how much time are they engaged with the workers, how much time are they engaged in understanding their customers. And it defines it in a way that you actually use it to recruit. I have found when I was hiring executive level people, they would come in and be interviewing for a director's role, which not directors as board of directors, but directors
Exactly.
underneath vice presidents
Yeah.
and officers. And they were thinking they were interviewing for their boss's job, who was there interviewing them to come into the organization under them. And I bring the document out and I say, your role is going to include these types of functions and responsibility. And they say, no, 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 I want that one up there. That's what I think I'm interviewing for. So people are totally misaligned into what they're expected to do and what their responsibilities are and what they want to do.
I would argue that if you're running a small business, if you think for sure, especially if it's your business you've been running, you absolutely think you know what all 10 or 15 people do. I think the single biggest challenge and opportunity is get really clear on what everyone does all day. And I know as hard as that is, because that was my aha. I still have that document to this day. Is when I did it with that recruiting group, and I used it for the next 20 years of my career. The first thing I ever did when I took over a group was I said, I just need to know what exactly do you do, right? I mean, and I always got the same. It was never easy, ever. I mean, it was so incredible. It got to where it was almost laughable. I'm like, I just want to know what you do. And some of the people who reported me made a lot of money. They make 300 grand a year, right? I'm like, seriously, you make 300 grand a year and you don't know what you do? And then they'd make up a bunch of yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm just like, whatever, we need to get clarity.
Yeah, and Tim, I'll tell you, it goes further than that. And as I said, I have worked every position in every organization that I've ever worked by shadowing somebody and actually doing the work with them and supervising me.
Uh-huh.
You go into an organization, in my opinion, one of the most critical things you do to change the culture to a healthy culture is work every single position at least once. And don't watch the work. Ask them to instruct you on how to do the work. So I've been a hospital biller, a hospital coder. I've worked in the morgue. I've worked in the ICU. I've washed toilets. I've taken the garbage out. I've made signs. I've been a security officer. Every single job, I did the work. And guess what you learn? You learn about the people because you ask them three questions. Ask them, number one, why did you join this organization? If they don't tell you they joined it to align with the mission, then it's an education opportunity,
Yep.
number one. Number two, you ask them, what are the three biggest barriers standing in the way of you doing a great job every day? And they have a list. They'll tell you exactly why they can't do their work successfully. And many of them are because of management and leadership. And the third thing is, after you know what those three things are, who have you told about your barriers? And then I documented it for 20 years. I still have the document today. And guess what you find? About 80% of them never tell their leadership because they think their leadership are too busy to care about what's standing in the way of them doing a great job. And when you do that, you learn everything about what everybody does. And all of a sudden, now you have a perspective about your organization that you didn't have when you sat in your office and wondered, what are they doing out there? Why can't we achieve our goals?
Which is why they need to get someone like you that's unbiased to come in and help them do that, because if they think they're going to do that on their own, it's too humbling. And I mean that, nicely, right? Because if you think I'm going to go do that yourself, it just becomes way too difficult to get everyone aligned. But I think the takeaway, because we're coming up on our hour, so I want to make sure that I kind of hit on this, is I think the opportunity and the takeaway from our conversation is exactly what you just went through. Understand and asking employees to teach us, well, that tells you how to do the job. That tells you how they know how to do it, right? I mean, that's really the key kind of learning piece of this.
Well, at the end of the day, Tim, if you're the owner of the company and you don't know what everybody is doing every day, how likely are you going to be successful?
Yeah, and it's not, and I think, and this is where I want to spend the last 7 minutes, even though it's a short period of time, but it's such a big topic. We could do a whole call on AI. This goes to my point about people have a hard time understanding if you haven't had fortune or misfortune to work for a Fortune 500 company, right? So that's a two-edged sword. But if you haven't done that, you don't realize that the whole game is productivity. Everything is productivity, right? I mean, so everything we do, mission, vision, objective, what's your role? When you kind of take everything out, if you ask what is a CEO, a leader's job, it's to increase productivity. That's it.
Yeah, and again, I'd go back to my initial statement when you asked me what would I tell my younger self. To me, the CEO's job is to motivate, engage, and inspire people to be great.
Which means increase productivity.
It ultimately means if they're great, then they're exceeding your expectations. They are maximizing productivity.
Exactly. And so in
And
the
you don't
end,
have to say that to them.
no, that's correct, because it's
Right?
kind of a bad word, right? But in kind of a leadership world, but that really, if you're really kind of driving it, that really is the number. If you look at the best leaders in the world, that is the number they're running, right? So when I was at Schwab, I'll just do one last thing on Schwab, is I had a branch downtown Indy. I don't remember the exact number because it's been a long time, but I think it was 9 employees. And I said, I need 11. I went to my boss. I'm still good friends with him to this day. I said, I need 2 more people. He said, no way, you're not getting them. And I said, but I have all the data to run. And he basically said, I'm paraphrasing, was, hey, Tim, we run every branch 2 employees short. So you're the leader, figure it out, right? Now, how does all that play into as our kind of last 5 minutes? Because I do know you have a hard stop at 10:45. Give us a kind of a summary of then how are they using AI and driving some of these things through it? And I know you only have 5 minutes, but
Yeah, that's right. I mean, AI is both a curse and a blessing, right? If it's used as a support, I find it a very valuable tool. If it's used as a replacement, I find that it's not.
oh, good. That's a really good way to start
Right?
it.
So it's like anything else, right? If you need a hammer, but you have a screwdriver and you keep using the screwdriver when you have a hammer, it's not productive. Right? AI to me is a support. It gives you a quicker way to find out information. Or if you have 2 reports and you want to say, where's the variation between the 2, look at it, find it, right? But it shouldn't replace the thought processes of the people that are working in the organization. It should make them more productive, not replace their productivity. So I am someone that believes that AI is valuable if used well. If it is abused, I think it is a hindrance to you being successful.
Yeah, it almost becomes a crutch,
Yeah.
right? Because then you start asking it questions it can't answer.
Well,
But
and
if you
when you
use it
ask
to
it
increase
questions,
productivity.
yeah, when you ask it questions it can't answer and then say, are you sure? It says, well, no, let me go back and look. Oh, no, you're right. I'm not sure. I told you the wrong thing.
That's right,
But
exactly.
people don't take the next step because they think because it answered the question, that's gospel.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's not. So how you use it and the quality control behind how are they updating it when it continually gives you the wrong response is something you can't control, but how you use it, you can.
And I think that I would encourage as kind of a parting thought is if you're running a small business, I don't know how much you embrace AI, but you definitely want to start, right? Even if you want to start small with the embracing of it, but know that you're starting small and start utilizing it for productivity gains. But to your point, be careful about it.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest. I mean, to me, it is useful. Just be careful how you're using it and make sure you're validating what you're getting as responses.
That's awesome. Okay, so how do people get in touch with you? How do we finish it? That's a good way to kind of finish this.
Yeah, so I have a website. It's a little bit long, but it's Re-envision Alignment Solutions, as you see at the top of the screen there. That website allows you to see my phone number. It gives you access to my email. It gives you access to set up a session.
Okay.
So you just click on the buttons. I automatically get notified. If you set up a meeting, it's put on my calendar because it only finds available time. And quite frankly, an initial call is an initial call. We discuss what you need. Because a lot of what I do so far, we really haven't talked about, which is how do I coach somebody that's in an executive role that needs to become more effective at leadership? And that's a whole nother section that we don't have time for today. But certainly we could talk through that. I could talk through that with clients because at the end of the day, when a leader is more effective, you're more productive. When a leader is more effective, you'll ultimately have a more aligned culture. And when a leader is more effective, you ultimately have higher profitability.
Yeah,
And so I can help them with that if they need it.
that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it, Carm. This was awesome. Thanks for the time. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
It's been my great pleasure, Tim. Thanks so much.